Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I interviewed Brett Lloyd and we had the most fantastic conversation. Honestly, we could have gone on forever. Brett tells us his story and where he came from in case you've never heard it before. And then we even talk a little bit about my journey and what I'm going through, and he's seen it a few other places. So there are so many gold nuggets in here for you guys to listen to. I cannot wait to share it with you. We'll get to it in just a minute.
With every start, we are born again. Open your heart, spend this time in your head.
So here with me, I have Mr. Brett Lloyd, who is known as the Thankful.Carnivore on Instagram. In case you have not seen him, go follow him. He is on there frequently and you can reach out to him, DM him with any questions that you may have. Brett, thank you so much for coming onto my channel today. Can you do me a favor and just tell everyone your story? You have an incredible story and I love listening to it. So for anyone who hasn't heard it, here you go.
Well, thank you very much, Amy, for this chance to speak to your audience and share my experience. I was born into a standard American diet food pyramid household. My mom and dad had this enormous vegetable garden. I had fresh vegetables year round. We had plenty of meat year round. And I mean, the vegetables were either picked that day fresh or my mom and dad had canned them. Had fresh potatoes year round. Dad was really good at growing potatoes, and underneath the house was a space for him to put them there. That was a really great cold cellar type kind of place. And so you had potatoes year round. Fresh meat, plenty of potatoes, the right amount of cereal, not the sweet stuff. Oh no, this was oatmeal, cream of wheat, boiled rice, yummy. Now I think, yeah, yummy. But you know, my mom and dad thought, and we as kids, as we went through our schooling, my sister and I, we thought, well, we're living like kings and queens here. And I was an athlete. My sister was an athlete. You know, I physically felt amazing. But out of the four of us, my dad passed away last year after 20 plus years of type 2 diabetes, and his kidneys finally crapped out on him completely. And I didn't learn about this way of eating, ketogenic diets, and the fact that type 2 diabetes is completely reversible with diet until he was already deeply into dementia. So, you know, it was just bad timing, unfortunately. My sister, my little baby 6 foot tall sister, suffers from IBS, ulcerative colitis, about killed her. And my mom had a lot of skin disorders, a lot of inflammation, type joint pain kind of things. Not full blown arthritis, but she was always hurting from something somewhere. Excuse me. And then there was me. I suffered from severe chronic depression, anxiety, and insomnia for over 40 years of my life. I started experiencing symptoms around the age of 15. That's when the sleep disruptions started, and my mood would start to crater out of nowhere. Not just your typical teenagers feeling sorry for himself, hormonal kind of stuff either. And things were very different then. There weren't teachers looking for signs of mental illness or counselors who were trained in that sort of thing. And I was an angry, depressed person. I was, you know, they have senior superlatives when you graduate from high school. I was the class grouch. Suffered for depression. For me was an extreme dissatisfaction with life. Nothing was ever good enough. I wasn't good enough. Became delusional. You know, Amy, if I just had this beautiful mug, everything in my life would be better. And then my wife or my parents, who I would cajole and browbeat mercilessly, would give me this mug. And within 10 minutes, I would find 50 things wrong with it and why it was a piece of crap and why everything just had to stay crappy. And that's it in a nutshell. It just got worse and worse. I had a promising career in psychology, which I sabotaged out of existence because I was mentally ill. And that was interesting to think back upon, because here I was surrounded by PhD level clinicians and nobody caught on to the fact that I was depressed. They wanted to focus on the fact that I drank a lot of beer. I drank a lot of beer because I was depressed, because my diet was garbage. But, and you know, and I mean, growing up, you ate what was served. You didn't have a choice. You weren't getting up from the table until your plate was empty. I went from that to, and I was always told, when you're old enough and you're out on your own, you eat whatever you want. And that's exactly what I did when I got out on my own. I mean, it was fast food, pizza with enormous amounts of beer, sodas. The thought of drinking just tap water was repugnant to me. I had become, without knowing it, this ridiculous, depressed, sugar carb addict monster who was making my life more difficult because of what I was eating. And of course, I was clueless. In 1990, I was formally diagnosed. My life had become so unmanageable that I had to check myself into River Park Psychiatric Hospital in Huntington, West Virginia, and they slapped the major depression diagnosis on me. Was in there for 16 days and really didn't learn a lot that I didn't already know. They put me out on Prozac, which at that time was very, very expensive, and I didn't have the insurance. And the doctor gave me samples for as long as he could, but I never really got the sense that it was helping all that much. But I did make some behavioral adjustments and started trying to be a better person. I was not a good guy when I was mentally ill. I was not a good guy at all. I was very dishonest. I was very hedonistic. I was somebody you wouldn't have wanted to be within 100 yards of in that day and time, unfortunately. But I did make some behavioral adjustments, and so things got a little better for a while. Then get divorced. I wrecked that marriage through, just horrible behavior. And then I met my current and final wife on the internet, of all things. And but I started having panic attacks before she and I connected. And to the point to where one night I rode in the ambulance. They gave me the nitro under the tongue, the whole 9 yards. I thought I was having a heart attack because I chain smoked like crazy back then. And fortunately, there was nothing wrong with my heart. Absolutely nothing. But and the first doctor I went to after that, I had the really long hair, and I'm a musician. I looked the part, and he was convinced that I was a drug addict. And he made me strip down in front of him to make sure I didn't have any shot marks on me. He was that convinced, and he would not prescribe me anything. He actually seemed disappointed that he couldn't prove that I was a coke fiend or something, which that just never interested me in any way, shape, or form. Then a few months after that, I mean, I started having really bad panic attacks while driving. Somebody would cut me off and my heart would start pounding where I thought I was going to jump out on the steering wheel. And went to a doctor there and he said, listen, if you don't start taking meds now, your life's going to become very unmanageable. You're going to be very uncomfortable. You're not going to like what's going to come. And neither will anybody else around you. And not long after that, I started taking Prozac. And not long after that, I met my current and final wife. And the next couple of years were pretty good. We were started to build a life together, and I had experienced joy being with her. That was different, but it didn't last. My mood started to crater again with greater and greater frequency for no obvious reasons. Fast forward to 2007, I have a classic nervous breakdown. There was a familial event that occurred that I don't go into detail about to protect the innocent. And I didn't sleep for more than an hour or two for 2 months. And when you don't get more sleep than that, very bad things start to happen to you. And for me, it was hearing kids playing in the yard when there was nobody at home. And then my diagnosis got changed to major depression with psychotic features. I was like, great, I know what that means. You have the makings of a thought disorder, Brett. Lucky you. And so then the medicine merry-go-round started. They gave me this drug called Remeron, which helped me sleep for 2 weeks. It was great, except I gained like 25 pounds in that 2 weeks because that drug is a notorious weight-gaining medication. And then I went on another 6-week tear of only an hour or two a night of sleep. And they started throwing all sorts of things at me, trying to stop the free fall because my mood was just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And they put me on an antipsychotic with Prozac combination called Symbyax. And that stopped the free fall. And they put me on trazodone, which is an antidepressant, but it's used off label to help with sleep. I took trazodone for 8.5 years. I did sleep, but I woke up with a drug hangover each and every morning. The Symbyax was a very sedating medicine too. I would sleep 10 to 12 hours a night. And then during the day, I would have to take 1 or 2 2-hour naps. So that's not much of a life. After living that way for the better part of a year, I'm like, this is horrible. I couldn't touch my instrument. I couldn't play guitar. The thought of it was just terrifying because for me, music's always all about emotion and feeling versus just hearing. So the thought of just playing my guitar was very scary to me then. And I just decided one day, I knew it was in December, the end of December of 2008, right? I decided, okay, I've got to make some changes. I can't fix what happened. There's nothing I can do about the familial thing. Put it on the shelf and move on with your life. You can't keep living like this. And so I sort of kind of talked myself into feeling a little bit better. And I complained to my wife one day about how much weight I've gained. And she's like, well, I've heard about this Atkins diet. Why don't you look at it? And I was like, okay. And still being Mr. Crazy Man, I just kind of glanced over it. Oh, you can have all the meat you want. Cool. And you can have some sweet things, great, but you have to give up your bread and your potatoes. Well, that's a fair trade. I can live like that. And I lost 35 pounds and my mood got better, but at no time did me, my wife, or my doctor see a relationship between my mood improvement and that change in eating. But I was able to function at a high enough level. I started writing and playing music again at home. I started writing and recording at home again. I later that year started performing in churches, that kind of thing, which was a little way better than playing in bars. Oh gosh. I got to go to my 30-year high school reunion. Had a really good time. Came home, wrote an album pertaining to a lot of what occurred and how I felt about, 30 years after high school, et cetera. And then, things were pretty good. I mean, I was still not well, but I was a whole lot better. And then I decided depression is such a liar and it's so insidious. I had the notion that I really missed ice cream and coconut cake so much that I could eat that again. And if I gained the weight back, I could always just go back on Atkins. What could go wrong? And July of 2010, I'm at Mass on a Sunday evening. I'm a thankful Catholic convert. Mass is very important to me. And then, it's right before communion. Everybody's on their knees. And I get hit with this overwhelming notion. If you don't get out of here right now, something really bad is about to happen. And it was very atypical, but it was undeniably as real as anything I'd ever felt before. And I literally ran out of that church. 15 minutes later, I'm curled up on the couch in our living room, bawling like a baby and have no idea why. And from 2010 to 2015 was just an absolute horror show. It just got worse and worse, and I got more and more obese, and the medicine merry-go-round started up, and I mean, they put every combination of Prozac and some other, this won't kill you together with Prozac, and we don't think, kind of med, and the same thing would happen. I would feel maybe a little better for a time, and then out of nowhere, my mood would crater out again. And I was, like I said, I was an angry, depressed person. I was not fun to be around. And that's why I tell people, my wife has earned her place in heaven because she stuck with me through all of this. She had a really hard time because I couldn't accurately perceive my environment. My wife would say, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day today, just like that. But that wouldn't be what I heard. My illness would filter it, twist it, and never in my favor, to where what I would hear would be, it looks like it's going to be another beautiful day. Oh, great. And I love my wife. I would look at her and, honey, what's wrong? And of course, she would look at me like the crazy man I was and say, I just told you, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. I couldn't, what she was saying was never what I heard. I always heard changes in her voice or tone that suggested something negative was at play. And she couldn't understand me at all. And so we had that grinding on each other all day, every day. Then we have to move. Her job moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where we knew no one. I had to go fishing for a doctor, which was not very pleasant. Then I found a nurse practitioner who put me on Seroquel. And for about 6 months, we actually thought Seroquel might be the answer we've been looking for. Because I wrote another album. I did a really bad job producing it. The songs were good. The performances were great. The recordings and mixes were horrible. But I couldn't hear that. And I couldn't process in my head mentally what I needed to fix these things. I had the knowledge, some knowledge, but I just couldn't. I'd look at these tools on my screen and I don't know what the hell that means. Fast forward January 5th, 2015, I weigh 289 pounds. I'm on 6 or 7 different meds. My psychiatrist, the last one I'll ever have, not named Georgia Eade or Chris Palmer, says to me, you should seriously consider electroshock therapy and or a long-term hospitalization. Well, I had seen ECT patients after they'd had the treatment, like 15, 20 minutes after that. And no, I was not going to let somebody turn me into an animated looking corpse. And my fear about checking myself into a hospital was I might go in and never get to come out. Then this friend of mine, I was still writing music, and I had a bunch of pieces of blues music that I knew I couldn't sing. So I put an ad in Craigslist, and this lady, very talented young lady, or yeah, I said young lady, she'll get a kick out of that. She's as old as I am. I discovered her, an incredibly talented woman named Kimmy Wade, and I mention her name in every interview because without her, none of this happened. And she's watching me fall apart while we're working and we're actually making progress on this album. And finally, one day she says, have you ever thought of medical marijuana? Now, as a musician, it was always around, but I had a bad experience with it when I was young. So I was like, I don't need that. And beer's legal. Y'all here. I don't need this. So I knew what was going on in Colorado and Oregon. It was around that time when they voted in their legal medical marijuana programs. And so my wife and I were like, well, what do you have to lose? You've tried everything there is to try. And did some research. There was anecdotal evidence similar to what we see in the carnivore community of people experiencing symptom relief. So my wife secured 4 grams of flour, which is a minute amount, learned how to make can butter, and she made these cookies. I was scared to death of these things. I broke, they're the size of a quarter, and the first one I broke in half. And Amy, I put that in my mouth, and after 10 minutes, I felt like 1,000 suns had lifted off my body. I wasn't high yet. I just didn't feel like crap anymore. And then 45 minutes later, the high kicked in, and we discovered, much to our surprise, that the medical marijuana treated my symptoms by many orders of magnitude better than any psych med I ever took. My anxiety would drop to almost nothing. My mood would come up to the point to where I could carry on a rational, semi-rational conversation. My sleep improved significantly. And my wife came home that first day, and I've got a big old grin on my face. And she's like, what's wrong and where's Brett? Because she hadn't seen me do that in eons. And so for the next 3 years, well, no, wait a minute, I almost got ahead of myself. So daily routine, 420 protocol, 1 cookie at 4 o'clock. 10 days into this, I'm putting my shoes on, Amy, and I realize my belly's in the way. And I went and looked in the mirror and saw myself accurately for the first time in years. And I looked like something from The Walking Dead that just hadn't fallen over yet. A pasty, pale gray, looked like a heart attack or a stroke. Either one could happen at any time. And I immediately told my wife, Adkins starts again tonight. But see, even at that, we didn't really know what we were doing. I might have started feeling a whole lot better a whole lot sooner if we hadn't have poured the fat off the meat she was fixing for me. But we didn't know. We just didn't know. Anyway, over the next 3 years, using medical marijuana, the Atkins diet as I understood it, and I started walking. At first, it was a half a mile here, walking the dog a half a mile there, and then it was because I was very conscious of how dangerously at risk of injury I was. And I knew if I didn't go really slow, I hurt myself and really mess up because my left hip was already hurting really bad. My right shoulder hurt, throbbed all the time. I couldn't raise my arm up past this. I mean, I was from being obese, and the inflammation was getting worse throughout my body. I realize that now. But over the next 3 years, I walked off 94 pounds. At the end of 2015, I was off the antipsychotics and the antidepressants. At the end of 2016, I was off the Ativan. That was really hard to come off of. The day after I took my last eighth of a milligram dose, I woke up with vertigo the next day. Thank you, benzodiazepine addiction. And then by the end of 2017, I was off the trazodone. And with the exception of one run of antibiotics for an upper respiratory infection I had in 2019, I have had no pharmaceuticals since 2017. None. So I'm doing this. And then in May of 2018, this same friend calls or messages me and says, oh my gosh, you got to go watch every video made by this guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson. Okay, that seems rather weird and out of the blue, but so I went and looked, and naturally I found, back then, I don't know what it's like now when you go to look for him the first time, but I found the Jordan Peterson Destroys collection, where he just renders all these journalists into dust with common sense, truth, and logic. He made this one British news lady unable to speak for 10 seconds on the air, rendered her silent, and then said, gotcha. I'll never forget that. And it was just common sense and logic did it. I became a huge fan. So, you know, eat my cookie, go watch Jordan Peterson videos. Life was really cool because I was learning all this stuff. But then, and this is kind of emotional to talk about because I got to meet him Sunday and tell him this. So if the tears start coming, don't be surprised. It's happy tears. I saw him on a 30-minute cutout of Rogan where he described how his daughter figured out if she only eats beef, salt, and water, her arthritis symptoms go away. Her depression symptoms go away. And he talked about how his depression symptoms had gone away and how his anxiety had vastly improved. And I was at first like, are you serious? You've been sick like me and you're writing books like you're writing? How the hell are you doing that? But then I'm like, you know, if it's anybody but him, it's anybody but him. Don't lie. Tell the truth. Be responsible. If it's anybody but him, I'm changing the channel because that's crazy. Just eating meat. Why didn't some doctor, out of all the medical professionals that I saw, why didn't somebody ever recommend a dietary component to this or talk about it? Nobody ever did. But because it was him, I had made sure my wife watched it with me when she got home from work because I wanted to make sure I was really hearing what I was hearing. Oh yeah, he's really saying that. And so that led me to Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan. And again, you have this man with incredible integrity. You know, he used to have the launch codes to nuclear warheads. They don't let anyone do that. And then he became a trauma surgeon and they send him to war. They just don't let anybody do that either. You've got to be an extraordinarily well put together person to do that kind of thing with incredible character. And he's telling me that he has seen and helped people lose their mental illness. Okay, we're on to something here. And then I found a talk from Amber O'Hearn at Keto Fest 2017. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it to everybody who sees this video, because she explained in a way this guitar player could understand how as a species we came down out of the trees, literally, by eating meat. It's how we grew our skeletal structures to what they are today, how we grew these very large energy demanding brains. It was by eating animal protein and fat. So July 16th, 2018 was my first day eating meat and drinking water. Today is my 1353rd day of eating meat and drinking water. I have not had a single cheat day since. I haven't had a headache since July of 2018 as well. 10 days into it, I woke up without joint pain for the first time as an adult. I'd never thought of myself as arthritic. I was 57. Some of those gigs that I played while under the influence of my friend Budweiser, I would jump up on the table to play guitar solo, and sometimes the table would be like, I don't want you up here, and would fail. And you protect your instrument in that situation and sacrifice your body, and you might walk around like a question mark for a couple of days, but hey, that's rock and roll. And I had bumps and bruises, I had sore places, but I was ambulatory. There wasn't anything physically I didn't feel like I couldn't do. But when you don't have joint pain at 57, it's like being 7 years old again. And I'm taking my morning walk, skipping down the sidewalk, giggling to myself like some kid, because it doesn't hurt and it feels good. And then on the 24th day, taking a walk, it's like 6:30 in the morning, it's still dark outside. And it's like somebody flipped a switch. And all that rage, and all that anger, and all that sadness and shadowy garbage that kept me from being the person I always wanted to be, it just went away. It just went away. And it's never been back. Not even for a moment has it ever returned. And it was replaced by a waterfall of joy and happiness that has not left me since. There have been no bad days since that morning. Even when my dad died, that was a sad day. It wasn't a bad day. He wasn't suffering anymore. Me and my mom, we weren't suffering anymore from watching him suffer. It was not a bad day. It was a good day. And that's why I do these, because people need to know you're not broken. You're not, mom and dad didn't have an error. You're not a genetic mistake. You're not flawed. Your character is probably fine, or is as good as it could be, because you developed it with an inflamed brain that you didn't know you had. And people need to know you don't have to suffer like that anymore. It's not necessary. And since then, my quality of life has just skyrocketed. Then my wife, after me doing it for 30 days, I tell people, I said, yeah, when I didn't die after 30 days, she started doing it. But she started doing it really because she had osteoarthritis in her shoulders. And she was noticing that my wrinkled face was starting to be less wrinkled. And she's actually a couple of years older than I am, but she's always looked much younger. And that was starting to change. And also suddenly she wasn't the skinniest person in the house anymore. So she started carnivore, and in 30 days, she healed arthritis in her shoulders. And it opened the door to marital bliss that we never thought was possible. Because our communication just improved leaps and bounds. We don't waste time arguing about stupid stuff nearly as much. And when you're hormonally balanced, which this way of eating provides, then all your plumbing works as it's designed. So we're like 20-year-olds without the stupidity and the ignorance of being 20 in our private time together. It's like living a fairy tale sometimes. It's so incredible. And who doesn't want that? If you've got a significant other, you want that. You need, and that's what I've come to believe and find out. And Dr. Kim Berry and I talked about this. He let me interview him once, and he said, listen, when a human body is properly nourished, properly hydrated, properly rested, and is in an environment that permits it, and they're loved by somebody, their natural state is one of happiness. And that was in answer to a question because I had been, the only words I could come up with was, I feel like I'm experiencing effortless daily happiness. Because I wake up just happy as all get out. And it's every day, and it's all day long. Now, things can still make me angry, but it's very short term. It's not something that because who wants to ruin their day that way? Not me. And I got into talking about my experience after somebody I grew up with messaged me. At that time, I was only talking about it on Facebook, and to the people I wasn't doing the social media influencer thing. I didn't even know what that was then. And talking about and starting to show some before and after pictures, etc. And this woman messages me. She says, Brett, what are you doing? I've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis. They're telling me I'm going to be in a wheelchair for most of the rest of my life. What are you doing? Will this help me? And I said, well, it won't hurt you. And I sent her to where I learned how to do the way of eating, which was zeroing in on health on Facebook, where Kelly Hogan and Charles Washington, Dr. Lisa Wiedemann, all those people hang out. And she messaged me back 6 weeks later saying, I fired my neurologist because I am now symptom free. And I knew right then I had to start telling the world any way I can. And that's why I do these interviews too, because it's the only way we can get around the media. It's the only way that we can get people out of the disease management system is by sharing our experiences. And you don't have to lose 100 pounds and multiple mental illnesses to have a story that somebody's going to be inspired about, to hear from. Some people lose 10 pounds, and that 10 pounds is somebody else's dream. So share your experiences, share your stories, because more people need to learn. You don't have to take medication for the rest of your days. You don't have to feed somebody's revenue stream under false pretenses anymore. And thank you so much, Amy, for this chance to share all this.
I'm not even needed here. We could just wrap up right there and call it good. I mean, you said everything. Oh my gosh. I love your story, and it speaks to so much of what I myself have been through. I remember the panic attacks while driving. I remember that. So my doctor, in all of their wisdom, they thought that my panic attacks could be an allergy to wheat. So they gave me an EpiPen.
Oh.
And they told me,
Oh, no.
the next time you start having a hard time breathing like that, and you think it could be from cross-contamination, shoot yourself in the leg with an EpiPen.
Oh, no.
So I was several hours away from home driving and had a panic attack and had just had some Arby's, just the meat, assuming that I got cross-contamination, stabbed myself in the leg with an EpiPen.
What, you didn't fall asleep behind the wheel?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't drive. I couldn't do anything. So I had to call 911. They had to come and take me to the closest local hospital. My mom ended up having to drive hours to come and get me. I mean, big giant disaster. I remember those. I remember those panic attacks. I remember that feeling of being trapped by not only the depression, but also the medication, because it would make some things feel better, but then other things would be worse. And you're like, no, but this one thing is getting better. And you're not paying attention to the 18 other things that are getting worse, but this one thing is getting better. And that's all the doctor sees.
I'm jealous. I didn't get one thing to get better. I'm really jealous.
That's so true. You and medicine. Oh my gosh. But there's just so many things about your story that are so encouraging. And I have to ask, do you ever get tired? Do you ever get tired of sharing your story and going over it?
Never.
Good.
It is the greatest blessing to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a blessing. It's always, these are tears of joy. This is, I mean, to come out of that alive, first off, and then to have this quality of life, to not share it would be criminal in my mind.
And to still have your wife.
Oh.
Who has earned her gold medal and her place in heaven. Yeah, don't worry, my husband has earned his gold medal for dealing with my crap too. Yep.
Well, I hope your husband's carnivore as well, because if he's not, y'all missing out on half the fun, I'm telling you.
Oh yeah. No, he's like 99% carnivore. He does. Let me see. What did he eat the other day? It was like he had something with keto barbecue sauce. You know, and that doesn't affect him in any negative ways that we can tell.
It's an important way. If you phrase that exactly right, you can't tell if there's something wrong yet.
Yeah.
I highly encourage everybody. This is, and I know you've got something you've got to figure out before you can do this. So I'm not picking on Amy. Don't be writing hateful letters. We see this in the formerly MeatRx, but now Rivero Health community, that people underestimate the inflammatory damage caused by the smallest amounts of things that we should never put into our mouth. And that's why some people are doing 90-95%, but they have lingering issues and they don't understand why they're not getting better. And it's because their diet is not inflammation free yet. And, you know, coupled with this way of eating and another natural inflammation reduction thing that I've come across recently through one of our coaches, Becky Niles, is grounding. Highly recommend people look into grounding, because it is, all it costs you is time. Get your feet in the grass, your feet in the dirt. I've got a grounding wrist thing right here so that I'm grounded all the time. It really does naturally reduce your inflammation. When we're grounded with the earth, electrons come up out of the earth and into our body. Why? I don't know. I'm a guitar player. And it reduces the inflammation in our bodies. How? I don't know. I'm a guitar player. It just works. In order for me to be a proficient professional musician, I have to play and practice 4 to 6 hours a day. And at age 61, this finger can resent that a lot. But with the grounding, and I mean, it used to throb. I used to have to take Motrin for it. I used to wake up in the morning after a gig and have to do this to get it to bend and those kinds of things. Not fun stuff. But with the grounding, I can play 6, 8 hours a day. And the next day, full flexibility, full range of movement, no soreness, no discomfort. My quality of sleep has improved dramatically. I'm sleeping longer. And when I lay down, that's exactly the same position I wake up in. I used to wrestle around in the bed, pull the top sheet, bottom sheet out from under the mattress. I used to do all that stuff. And then my wife couldn't get the covers back. It was she suffered in all sorts of ways. And all of it's gone. So grounding with carnivore, the carnivore way of eating is a perfect pairing of natural things. And stop and think about it, Amy. For millions of years, we didn't have synthetic footwear that was insulating us from the earth. We slept on the ground. We ate on the ground. We sat on the ground. We walked on the ground. If we had footwear at all, it still permitted grounding because it was only animal skin. Or maybe wood. If you were Danish, it might be wooden shoes. You didn't know. But seriously, that's how people were. If you survived childbirth and had no childhood illnesses and stayed injury free, you could live to be, say, 70, 80, 90 years old, just like we do today. And the hygiene back then was nothing like what we have now. Can you imagine what everything smelled like back then? I don't think it would be pleasant. So we have these tools and people need to be aware of them. And I don't know if you had asked a question and I just went on a rant, but I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love the grounding. We're up in Wisconsin. It's flipping cold here and I cannot wait for it to get. So right now I'm kind of doing grounding and cold therapy.
The two of these for $15 from Amazon.
I'll have to go look at. So y'all, there'll be a link down below. If you want to go look at the grounding bands, I'll link those down below. They'll be in my Amazon store. So what's funny, I'm a huge proponent of carnivore for 30 days for everybody. I think everybody should give it an all-in carnivore try for 30 days. Because then when you try to bring those other things back in, your body generally gives you amazing feedback very quickly about what doesn't work.
And feedback.
Yeah. And I'm very jealous. I really am. I was actually in tears about 2 weeks ago, just crying. And my husband was like, "What is wrong?" And I said, "It's not fair." I said, "I wish I was one of those people who could just eat meat and get better. But I wasn't able to do that. And it's not fair because I know in my heart of hearts and up here in my brain, I know that if I could just eat meat, that I would get healed and that is the way it's supposed to be. And I can't do it. And it's not fair. And I wish I would give anything to be that person." And he said, "No." He said, "This is happening for a reason because there are other people who can't just eat meat and have it happen. They feel like they're a failure. They need you to talk about it. They need you to be open about it and be honest and be like, I know what's going to work. It's not that I'm convincing myself, oh, well, I have to have plants. I know it's the way to go. And my dang body is not agreeing with me. So now everyone gets to follow me on my journey. And maybe it will help them figure out what's wrong with their body, why it's not complying." Like when we were talking before we started recording, you said you could hear Michaela Peterson's voice in the back of your head. There's other underlying components. There's, C. diff, H. pylori. There's so many things that it could be. Because when I went all in strict carnivore, 4.5 months, convinced that it was going to completely fix everything, I got to a point where I couldn't swallow the next bite. Even cooking the meat, I was physically gagging. That's not normal. There's something else there.
Yeah, there's also the possibility, and I'm just throwing this out there because I've seen this before with a few clients. And plus, I facilitate 2 mental health meetings. I was doing 3 mental health meetings, but I had to give one of them up when I started becoming a working musician again. So I facilitate 2 mental health meetings a week for Rivero Health. And what we've seen is people experience what you are, and I have no idea what you've been eating, what you've tried, what you haven't tried. But what many of these people discovered was they weren't eating what their body craved yet. They were eating what they thought they should be eating, what they liked versus what they crave, which there's a look up the dish. Those words mean different things. But when they started eating, once they figured out what they craved, then they could eat with abandon and start healing. Now, for myself, I didn't figure out what I craved, what really satisfied me for the first 5.5 months. I ate a variety of meats, but always had bacon, because before I started doing this, I researched through zeroing in on health and saw that the biggest reason why people failed at this was boredom. I'm tired of just eating meat, man. It's tired. I don't even like to look at it anymore. And I could intellectually understand that. So I thought about it, and I realized while bacon was never my favorite meat, there was never a time that bacon was on the plate that I didn't enjoy the meal. So I made up my mind I was always have 2 meats, and one of them would always be bacon. And I really think God was talking to me through my intuition then, because it was spot on. It's exactly what I needed to do. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've never had any problems. But in December of 2018, I discovered that lean ground beef with bacon is just magic for me. It is so satisfying. You know, we had to take a trip here over the weekend to go meet Dr. Jordan Peterson at Michaela Peterson's invitation, no less. I had to get that in there. And so we're eating Whataburger meat, which was fine. It was nothing but beef, 100% beef, but it wasn't 90-10 or 93-7 ground beef. It wasn't anywhere close to that. And when we got home Monday evening after that, and we had our first meal fixed here at the house with our meat that we purchased at the store, etc., the difference was just monumental. Yes, Road, you can function and survive, but I don't know that I could do that endlessly and succeed.
I know, like Kelly does. She did it for so long with the McDonald's patties. And I mean, it worked and that's the thing. You got to find what works for you. And you're absolutely right. At the beginning of my all-in carnivore, I had been listening to too many people that said that the only way to do it was grass-fed, grass-finished with organs and unsalted butter, if you were going to have butter at all.
Oh,
that's all I ate for 2 months. That's all, because I was convinced. I listened to them, and logically it made sense that was the healthiest thing. So that's what my body needed. I was honestly, I would say that I became orthorexic. I was so obsessed with making sure that it was the perfect nutrition that went into my body that I was no longer willing to consider anything else. So finally, after 2 months of that, I went back to chicken and bacon and things like that, but I found no joy in them at all. And I didn't want to eat anything. And after 4.5 months of not being able to eat any kind of animal product at all and finding any joy in it whatsoever, that's when I was like, okay, my husband was like, you have to do something, like bring back in spices, do something. So that's when I brought back in the spices and the keto sauces. And that's honestly what makes up most of my, non-carnivore foods is the spices and sometimes keto sauces, which those bring my rosacea out. So I avoid those ones a lot, but that made it possible for me to get back to it. To this day, I still undereat. I'm still notorious for I haven't hardly eaten anything. I can eat about 500 calories and then I'm stuffed and I don't want to eat anymore.
That is also a common problem for people who come down with this notion
Meat
of
aversion.
meat aversion because they're not eating enough.
Mhm.
So their body is like, well, if you're not going to give me what I need, screw this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, literally, that's the body's response. This is not what I need. I need a different kind of meat. Now, how I coach people in this kind of a situation, I say, go to the biggest meat counter in your area. Do not look at prices. Leave your intellect in the trunk of your car and listen to your body and what jumps out at you. And if something jumps out at you, go over to it. Don't look at the price, just look at the meat. Make sure you're listening and you're trusting your intuition here. And it's really hard for a lot of people because we were taught to ignore our intuition. And the thing about our intuition is it will never mislead us. Never will it mislead us. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you the meat you should be eating. If you can hear what your intuition is indicating. I mean, there were all these beautiful cuts of meat at this. I was at a Sam's is where I did this. And these beautiful tomahawk steaks, and they were just glorious, and they were ridiculously expensive. And all the filet mignon and all this stuff that I can't afford, but oh gosh, would it be great to have it. But what jumped out at me were these tubes of bright red ground beef, 90-10. And I picked one up and looked at my wife and said, we're buying one of these, and I think I'm supposed to eat this. And I knew after the second bite of the first burger patty that this was what I'd been looking for all along. And then my healing went into turbo mode, and that's when things really got going gangbusters in that regard. So if you haven't done that experiment, try it. I can't swear that it's going to work because other people have been like, you know, I found that and I did feel better for a while, but then something else started happening. So you might have something else underlying that you're just not aware of yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm working on getting testing because now, whatever I feel like, if I feel like pork belly, that was my new obsession for a little while. Like pork belly was amazing. It still is. I had some this morning actually. But no matter what it is, but that was my problem was I was listening to the people who said the perfect bite of nutrition is what you have to do to get better. And I got sucked into it. So that's one of the reasons I'm out here. I'm like, guess what? I'm still dealing with being an undereater because I underate for so long and I restricted believing that you have to have the perfect nutrition. I have people contact me daily that say, why are you making chicken? Chicken's inflammatory. Why are you eating pork? Pork has too many PUFAs in it. And I'm like, because I want it.
There are certain physicians who I will not name. There was a certain physician whose name I will not utter. I just, at times, I want to slap them. I want to slap them and put them in timeout for the next 5 years to think about the harm they've done to people by spreading this nonsense. And then, you know, honey's good for you too. You know, I know you know who I'm talking about.
I know. I bought into it. I did it all. I did this, people, so that you don't have to. Don't do it. I would rather you eat the crappiest meat possible in the grocery store over anything else. I mean, seriously, just if a can of Spam looks good, go eat the can of Spam.
In a heartbeat.
I mean, I don't care what it is. The little Vienna sausages, go eat them. I don't care. Bologna yes, it's got crap in it. I don't care if that's what sounds good. And that's what's going to get you moving forward in the right direction and get over this fear of chicken and pork and everything else. Do it. I don't care how bad quality it is, because obsession with perfection is absolutely hindering any progress.
It leads to failure every time.
Yeah. And I'm still dealing with it. And I do really believe that I have underlying conditions. I do believe that there's something going on in my gut, because every time I try to go the full carnivore, bad thing, I just start getting that severe meat aversion again. So that's my journey. We'll see.
What does satiety feel like for you? Do you know?
If on a good morning, I can get a full pound of pork belly in, that is generally about as stuffed as I can get myself. And a pound of pork belly is like 1,100 calories, I think.
Oh, so you're counting calories.
No. But that's the way I track, I have to track, because if I don't track, I'll eat 500 calories a day and I'll be good. Because my hunger hormones are completely screwed up. So I have to track to know that I'm at least getting something of enough.
Have you had your thyroid tested?
And so don't worry, that's coming too.
Okay, because like that, you're talking. The more you share, the more it sounds like you might have a thyroid issue.
Oh yes, and well, my newest learning expedition has been on iodine, which supports the thyroid. So I'm getting into all of that. I've read Dr. Brownstein's book and Lynn Farrow's book on iodine, and I'm figuring out the doctors that did to iodine what Ansel Keys did to fat, which really kind of ticks me off. So the more I learn and the more I implement, the better things are getting, but it's a process.
There's a lady out in California named Elle Russ.
Huh.
And she has written 1 or 2 books about her thyroid experience. And she got mad enough because she was getting a runaround to where she did the research and she found out what really causes all of this and what really fixes it and whatnot. And I can't recite any of that stuff because, again, I'm a guitar player. What do I know about thyroidism? But you might want to look into her. She's very accessible on Instagram.
I'll have to go look her up, and then I'll link her down below as well.
Underscore Elle Russ.
Underscore Elle Russ. Yeah, my mom has Hashimoto's disease, so there's a really good chance that I have thyroid problems.
Well, Caitlin Weeks is another good person to reach out to. Grass-fed girl. Okay. On Instagram. She just gave birth to their first child, and she has Hashimoto's, and she's been carnivore for I think 4 years now at least. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that she's off the medication yet, but she had reduced it significantly the last time I had talked to her a couple of years ago.
Yep. Anisha Berry reversed her. Yep. Yeah,
they're cool. They're awesome.
Yep. I love it. So I think for me, I'm one of those puzzle pieces that there's more going on than just eating meat. Well, I mean, even listening to your story, your family, everyone in your family had different symptoms. Everyone had different issues that they developed by eating the same diet. And you're even genetically, linked, but you all ended up with different things and different problems. So as much as I'd love to say this one thing will fix it for everybody, that isn't always the case. Sometimes you got to figure out how to work around these issues. And I completely agree with you. Finding someone to work with, finding your community and finding your people and listening to the right people can make such a huge difference. So I want to encourage everybody. We should absolutely wrap this up. It's been an hour.
I need to go eat dinner.
Yes. So we're gonna wrap this up. So for anybody who is looking for you, you are the Thankful Carnivore on
Thankful.Carnivore.
Yes. On Instagram. So I will link down below for the grounding bands and for Elle Russ as well. And I cannot thank you enough for coming and talking with us today.
Amy, I could have sat here. We could have talked for 3 or 4 hours. I feel certain about this because we're both very passionate about it. And it's been a real pleasure meeting you and speaking with you. And I look forward to our next conversation because I'm sure it's going to be just as awesome as this one was.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic dinner.
Back at you. You have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.